Foreign policy analyst Michael Moran joins me now from Denver. Good to have you with us.
Glad to be here, Rosemary.
So the Trump administration plans to brief the House and Senate Wednesday, nearly a week after the drone strike that killed Qasem Soleimani. Their justification for his killing was to prevent imminent attacks that Soleimani was apparently planning on Americans. How much intelligence should be provided to Congress, and why is the administration being so vague on its justification?
Well, the amount of intelligence that the president decides to release to the Congress, to some extent, it's really his discretion. Soleimani has been implicated for years now in a kind of state-sponsored terrorism. Iran was never removed from that list, even though the nuclear deal did remove some economic sanctions. So therefore, I would imagine that the administration is going to lean on that pretty heavily. They're going to also continue to explain that the sources of the intelligence could be put at risk should they make it public. This is not a unique argument from presidents. This goes back decades. Many presidents have said the same thing after taking controversial moves. But you know, this has a special flavor to it in that we've killed a ranking general of a military that we're not technically at war with. So there is some complication there.
Yeah, and of course, no one is disputing the fact that Soleimani was a bad guy. But President Trump says Americans are a lot safer as a result of this drone strike that killed him. Is that the case?
Well, it's a judgment call. There are Americans who are in the field in Iraq and in the region who very well could have been targeted by Soleimani's Quds group during his tenure. Now that he's gone, I would imagine his successor will redouble efforts to do exactly that. The other part of this, though, is that having crossed this particular Rubicon, I would imagine the family of every general and every admiral in the United States is a little concerned that this has set a precedent, that they are targets, not just the general officers themselves, but also their families, their staffs. This could be, and Iran is not Iraq. It's not Afghanistan. This is a country that has global terrorist networks that it has supported and nurtured for years. Some of them, Hezbollah in particular, are very capable. And I think this is something that has to worry the U.S. military.
And what's your response to President Trump's threat to strike 52 Iranian targets, including cultural sites, if Iran retaliates, even as Mr. Trump's own defense secretary contradicts him, saying the U.S. will follow the laws of armed conflict?
It's impossible to tell what's bluster in this administration and what is reality. The thing that came to mind when I heard that was that, look, even the Nazis left the Eiffel Tower standing when they evacuated Paris. Now, they probably, if Hitler had his way, it might well not be standing. But
yeah, they tried.
it is a war crime. Essentially, it's a crime against humanity of sorts. That's not the technical term, but there are codes that protect cultural sites. Isfahan and other sites in Iran are treasures of the ancient world that have nothing to do with this dispute. And it would really be another kind of sad precedent should that happen.
Right, and the UK, France and Germany, they did issue a joint statement calling for a de-escalation of tensions and for cooler heads to prevail. What does that signal to you? And could the US be isolated here, left to take any future action alone?
It's pretty unilateral foreign policy that's being pursued over the last 4 years, 3.5 years. The political capital that the United States had built up with our European allies was deeply damaged in the Iraq war to start with. And this has really been the coup de grace. The statement that was issued today was about as milquetoast as you could get. It wasn't critical, but it certainly wasn't supportive of any further actions on the part of the U.S. Now, having said that, the Iranian response is what everybody needs to know before judging the next step on the U.S. This is not something that came out of the blue. The Iranians have done a number of things over the past 6 months that were really unprecedented in and of themselves. In particular, the Houthi missile strikes on the Saudi oil fields, the shoot down of the drone, and so, you know, the reaction from a president who was just as just as shoot from the hip when he abandoned the Kurds in the north of Iraq, shouldn't have been surprising to anyone. I do believe, though, that it does not take into proper consideration the potential reactions from Iran. Iran can do an awful lot of things short of going to war with the United States that will not ultimately be in the benefit of anybody. And that's the real concern here.
Michael Moran, we thank you for your analysis. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rosemary.